Got it? Well, good evening. The title of this evening's talk, it might be a little bit misleading because I'm not an expert on the whole of India. In fact, I'm not an expert on all the Unitarians in India, but in particular, I'm thinking of a few in Delhi and a large number in Chennai. There's one Unitarian church in Chennai. I visited there, but not for many years. I'm certainly not an authority on the history of the Chennai congregation. So the Unitarians I know in India, I visited on that original trip, which I'll be talking about, and they're all within a hill area called the Khasi and Jaintia hills, and that's in Meghalaya, close to the border with Bangladesh. So if you go north from Bangladesh across the border, immediately you come into the Khasi and Jaintia hills. So it's that little area which was called Assam, now Meghalaya, where the Khasis, well, let's go to the first slide and we'll start talking about the history of the Unitarians in the Khasi Hills. Now, the person that founded the Khasi Unitarians was somebody called, we need to go back a few, back two, I think, maybe three or four. Yeah, that's it. Hajam Kishore Singh. That's Hajam Kishore Singh, and he was born in 1865 and lived until 1923. And when he was a young man, he discovered he was first of all converted by the missionaries who abounded in the Khasi Hills to the Methodist church. And when he was in his early 20s, he felt that was too restrictive, and he was concerned about some of the treatment of the local tribal people and the fact that their indigenous religion was frowned upon by the missionaries, and they weren't treated with respect. And he was looking for something wider, and he discovered the Unitarian Church and called his church the Unitarian Union of Northeast India. And he was living in Jawai. He was born in Jawai and lived in the Jaintia hills most of his life. But Shillong is not far away, and the Khasi-Jaintia relationship, in fact, the whole area is called Khasi in the Khasi language. And in Khasi, Kaniyam was the name for Unitarian, and it was an inclusive faith. He was concerned about the lack of inclusivity in most of the Christian churches which were being rapidly converted at that time. So although he had some good friends who were missionaries, his own religion was more inclusive, and he wanted to see equal regard for all the religions of India, for Buddhism, Hinduism, the Jain faith, and the Muslims, just to name a few. So he started his own Unitarian church, which was an inclusive church. And essentially, as with most of Christianity, the nonconformists evolved from an Orthodox Christianity. So the Unitarians in India not only treated the Bible with a little liberal interpretation, but they also listened to all the other religions, including Sangh Khasi, the indigenous Khasi faith. So if we could just have the next slide, please. Along came Margaret Barr. Now, this was the first time I went to visit on my original journey overland in an old Bradford ambulance. And I traveled overland. I didn't say much about my journey to people around me in England because I didn't know whether I'd get to India. My vehicle cost me £35, and it wasn't really very healthy. So I set off quietly, visiting a European group on the way in Switzerland, people I saw last week actually. We had holidays together at different times in my life, and we're still meeting. So after saying goodbye to the people in Stoos in Switzerland, I carried on through Europe, through the Middle East, through Afghanistan, into India. And I think we might as well have the next slide, please. So there I am. That's when I was a handsome young chap with a beard, and there I'm wearing my new Afghan coat. And I've got a monorail camera on a tripod because my profession was photography, and I was as interested in photographing all these places on my journey as I was in getting to India, in fact, really. And when I got to Pakistan through the Khyber Pass, from where I am in this picture, I was on Lahore television exhibiting photographs taken in my job in England in the textile industry. My vehicle was an ambulance, and it had the name ambulance on the front. And Margaret Barr, after I'd stayed with her for a couple of months, said, what's the name of your ambulance? It should have a name. And she came up with the name Veronica because she was quite keen on alliteration. And she decided that Veronica, who made the journey all the way from the UK to Khasi Hills in India, was a versatile, valiant vehicle. Therefore, Veronica would be a suitable name. So that became Veronica. That's me with Veronica. The next picture, which we like, it really symbolizes my interest in India because it's a joyous picture. My son was with me, and his face ended up being green, I think. And here we are enjoying the Hindu festival of Holi in Shillong. Now, Shillong is the tribal area. Most of the people you bump into don't look like this, and are not of the same branch of the Hindu faith. Now, you probably know more about it than I do. They're certainly Hindu, and that seems to be a very inclusive religion. And I think the tribal religion, Sangh Khasi, is also considered to be one of the offshoots or one of the roots of Hinduism. Now, if we move on to the next picture, and that was just to set the scene, that joyous color picture taken on one of my recent visits to India. Here we go back to my first visit in 1967, and we're looking at a traditional Khasi house. So this picture was taken by me when I was first there, and you can't see the whole of the roof, but the roof curves from front to back over the building. So this is the overhanging section, which forms a porchway. Now, Shillong and the Meghalaya area on the border with Bangladesh gets an awful lot of rain. In fact, when I was there in 1967, Khasi and Jaintia Hills had the national record for heavy rainfall. So they were getting over 200 inches of rain in the monsoon season. That's the 3 or 4 months when they get almost continuous rain at times. So that's a thatched Khasi house, which would resist the rain only for so long. And in fact, that roof would have to be replaced at least once every 2 years, sometimes once every year, depending on how good the owner was at doing his own thatching. Let's now move on to the next slide, which is Margaret's house. That wasn't the picture that I expected. So if you move on one more. No, let's go back 2 and see if it's there. We seem to have lost Margaret's house, so I apologize. But we'll carry on with the picture of me on the balcony with the children. And there I am on the balcony of Margaret's house. which you'll have to do for now, with some of the family. And the family were waifs and strays, orphans from the villages around that area, the village of Karang, not far from Malat in the Khasi Hills. Margaret's house was built for her by a tribal friend who she met when she first left Mahatma Gandhi's ashram and went to do as he advised and to find somewhere to live. She was there as a representative of the Unitarian General Assembly, but not as a missionary. And she was very determined that she was not a missionary because Unitarians do not convert people. And she had a sister who was in fact a Welsh missionary, but Margaret was there as a Gandhian devotee, an educationalist. She was a wonderful teacher, and all those children had a great opportunity, a great start in life, with Margaret guiding them through their first few years. Let's have a look at the next slide, which is Margaret teaching on a one-to-one basis. Yeah, that's Margaret. We were quite fortunate. That was quite a luxurious teaching situation because there was actually a piece of chalk to go with the little chalkboard which Margaret's using. And I think she's doing some maths with that child. Let's have a look at the next slide. Again, that's not the one I was expecting, but that's me. And at the moment, I can't see all of it because I've got 3 images over my face. But that improves it from where I'm looking. You can probably see a bit more of it. And that's me with a canup on my back. So I've got this headband, and I've got a children's canup, which is a small conical basket, rather smaller than the one I should have been using. And I'm actually helping that little girl who's behind me to carry water from the well at the bottom of the path. So we're taking water, not very successfully because I'm not very experienced at using one of those, up to the orphanage, which of course was Margaret's house, the home, which she'd opened as an orphanage. And she just had 12 or 14 children living there during the year 1967 when I stayed with her. Let's move on now to the next slide. And this is a picture of Margaret's house. I was going to compare it with the first one, but the first one seems to have disappeared. The children are wearing, sorry, I'm getting my cot mixed up with my canup. Those are actually canups, those weather shields, which they cover themselves with. And I've got one in my hall here in England. I brought one back with me, and it was quite a joke bringing a full-size canup through Heathrow Airport and through the X-ray machine. I think the X-ray machine tried to eat it, but we just about managed to get it through. And that's in the rains, of course, where you get very wet. In fact, you just accept that you will get wet. And as soon as you get in, you take your clothes off and hang them up, and very quickly you will get dry because it's also quite warm. But you'll see Margaret's house is not as basic as the thatched house you first saw, but it's also pretty basic in that it's just a wooden frame with, would you believe it, flattened out kerosene cans used for the tiling. So the tiling on the roof there is actually recycled kerosene cans, which have then later been painted with a sort of waterproof paint, or what's it called? Anyway, it's the thing that I paint the bottom of my boat with every 2 years, and it's remarkably waterproof, of course. But you don't need to collect water and take it from the source down at the bottom of the hill. All you do is put a line of buckets along where the rain runs off the roof, And in the morning, you got gallons of water for cooking and washing. Okay, we'd like to go now to the next picture, which is a more recent picture. Yes, this is Iet sitting on her top bunk where she sleeps at night. And Iet is one of the family, not on my original visit, but we now have an orphanage built in the memory of Margaret Barr with about 20 children, and she is one of those children. So that was taken at the orphanage in Karang, not far from Shillong, on my last visit. If you'd like to move on now to the next slide. Children in the river, just enjoying the freedom of living in an Indian village rather than the hustle and bustle of many of the cities where I visit, Calcutta, Delhi, Chennai. Very, very busy, lots and lots of taxis, lots of vehicles. Even in Shillong, not too far away, you're quicker walking certain routes than taking a taxi, because if you take a taxi, you'll just be sitting for hours on end. These children have the freedom of the countryside, living in a Gandhian way of life, being taught the essential values of life, possibly by Margaret. So these are two of the children. Again, these are at the orphanage more recently than when I was there on my first visit. Let's have a look at the young lady doing her homework, sitting on a swing. This was early 2006, I think. I took this picture visiting the Annie Margaret Barr children's village, as it became known. And yeah, if you can see this picture well, you'll see that the document she's studying is her homework. And if you look at the edges of it, it's very, very well worn. So that document has probably been with many of her classmates. And the sun is now shining through the window on my face. So I can hardly see anything. But isn't it nice to have the sunshine? Okay, I'm in the shade here. Shall we move on now to a classroom, a village classroom, again on one of my visits, because since that wonderful year with Margaret, I've been going back every 5 or 6 years to go and see my friends and see my family. And on one occasion, I went actually just to see the head teacher at this school, who was a student at Margaret's school when I was there 10 years earlier. And this is a typical village school. It will be slightly different to the schools in Shillong, and the children you see are not wearing uniforms, which is actually quite unusual, because even some of the village schools, the children in that part of the world do wear uniforms. So it's quite an unusual picture, and this was taken again in the last 20 years. I cannot say exactly when, which of my visits. And if we now move on to the next picture, my wife is sitting on the right. Again, she's screened on the on the Zoom view that I've got. But the person on the right, if you can see that person, is my wife Dot, and she is in a meeting, a teachers' meeting of the people involved in organising the education in the Khasi and Jaintia hills. Because on one of our visits, on this particular visit, when Dot was with me, we were looking at the schools. We were inspecting some of the schools that had been funded and improved by funds from the Women's League in the UK, and generally encouraging the teachers and leaders of the education system in Shillong, based in Shillong and Jawai, to carry on doing a great job, because they've been, the Unitarians in those two cities have been very effective in improving the standard of education. And I'm convinced, as are many of you, I'm sure, that education is the most important thing, the thing that we really are not prepared to fund as much as we should be doing. So again, a Gandhian, part of the Gandhian philosophy, the more people are educated, the more they can look after themselves properly, look after their health and each other, and form a community, the better the quality of life will be, especially in the villages. And Mahatma Gandhi was a person who wanted to bring the riches of the cities of India into the villages, which are, of course, the majority of the population. Can we move on now to the present day? Two chaps in Meghalaya. This is a publication which I was only given 2 days ago, and it's just been produced by a group of people who are still working with my wife, myself, and several other people, helping to support the villages which Margaret Barr was so fond of in her lifetime in India. And it's now 50 years since Margaret died. And she died in a hospital in New Delhi, cancer. So we have continued by building a memorial hospital and keeping staff working at the hospital, and offering day clinics to the surrounding villages, not in Shillong, but in the village where Margaret lived. This book, Two Chaps in Meghalaya, is a book that's just been published. And it's a story of two volunteers who've been out working in the area of technology in education. And they are working for a company who are piloting some software and a system for improving the standards of education in this country, but also anywhere in the world. And they decided, because of our contacts in Meghalaya, that we would do some work in Geelong, Dewey, and certain villages not too far from there, to improve the quality of education with modern technology, with issuing children with tablets, and showing them a new program which is being piloted at the moment and tested out in those villages. If we go to the next slide. Stepping into schools. So here we see on the left children using the system. The teacher will have a device, and he's able to see how the children are responding in the classroom to a series of questions. Learning by questions, LBQ, is the name of the software which he is introducing. And I've been very honored, really, to be involved in allowing access to Unitarian schools in the area, or encouraging contact with Unitarian schools in the area in Meghalaya, so that they have the use of this equipment. And we move on to the next slide. Feedback was the king, and this is a system where the feedback is immediate. The teacher can see on his console how the children are answering the same questions all over the classroom, and which ones they're struggling with, so he can immediately look at the problem areas of the taught program. So the software is the actual taught classes, or the areas of learning which they're covering, whether it's grammar or it can be in any language, maths, of course, and yeah, bring technology to places which don't normally get the opportunity to learn in this way. We go to the next slide. In this precious commodity time. Here, teachers are looking to see how the system is working, and the author of the book is talking to them, showing them how the system works. And if we go on to the next slide, this was the last picture I took at the orphanage. I'm really going to finish with this picture. These are the children who were there on my last visit to the Khasi Hills just a few years ago. And that is the lineup of very eager faces. These children, and I would say it applies to all the schools that I visited over the years. I've been to a lot of schools in Jiwai, Shillong, and the villages throughout the area. There are about 25 churches, including 2 in Shillong and 1 in Jiwai, which have Unitarian congregations, and invariably the church will be the schoolroom during the week. So finally, I'm going to leave you with an image on the screen, which I don't know whether we can keep that on the screen afterwards, but it's just the final picture. And it's got the details of the website, the lbq.org, www.lbqlearningbyquestions.org. You know, if you want to learn any more about that system, have a look at the website. So yeah, if we can leave that on a screen, that would be fine. If not, here it is. Here it is.